Hello everyone and welcome to Module 4. This week we'll be talking about sexual and reproductive rights. Our objectives this week are as follows. First, we'll review the major arguments surrounding reproductive rights and contraception as human rights issues. So we'll examine both sides of the issue. We'll explain reasons why so many women die in childbirth around the world. And your Murray chapter provides, I think, a very compelling overview of all of these socio-ecological factors. We'll also look at factors that enhance or impede pre, peri, and postnatal care for women. And we'll look at why, over the course of history, sexual health and reproductive rights have been framed with a negative rights approach and how this can be changed. And your Murray and Smith texts in chapters 7 and 8 provide explanation of what a negative rights approach means versus a positive rights approach. And then finally, we'll take a look at the issue of infertility and why this is also considered a human rights issue. In Module 4, we talk about the issue of the Millennial Development Goal number 5, which has to do with maternal mortality and reducing that. By the end of 2015, we were supposed to meet certain targets, and we've talked about these in previous modules. So you'll take a look at where we are with maternal mortality. You might realize, too, that the United States is actually not at the top. It's actually has much poorer maternal mortality rates than other countries, and even some developing countries. In 2006, the WHO, together with the PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization, came together and decided to standardize a few of the terms that we're talking about in this module. One is sexual health. So the definition of sexual health by the WHO is much like the WHO's definition of health in that it's more than physical. It includes the emotional, mental, and social well-being in relation to sexuality. And there are human rights elements within this definition because it explicitly states that sexual health also involves and recognizes having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences that are free of coercion, discrimination, and violence. So for sexual health to be obtained and maintained, the sexual rights of all persons must be respected, protected, and fulfilled.
So why are sexual and reproductive rights so important? Well, we've talked about some of the global declarations related to human rights, and with human rights framework, people should have control of their lives and of their destinies, and have access to the information that they need in order to make these life-altering decisions. And when it comes to women, by providing women with opportunities to receive education, to have access to resources, and to have control of their bodies, this benefits our global society again, which is another theme, that providing this information, these freedoms, everyone benefits. In the module, we'll be talking about some international agreements that have supported reproductive health, not necessarily acted on. I think that's important to understand, that although these declarations and treaties are positive steps toward ensuring freedoms, that it takes governments to enforce these. So some of the declarations that you'll read about this module. One is Proclamation of Tehran, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, also known as CEDAW, which we've seen in really all of the modules so far. The International Conference on Population Development and Program of Action, which was from 1994. The Beijing Platform for Action in 1995. The Beijing +5 in 2000. Millennium Development Goals, which we also mentioned, and the Beijing +10. So in chapter 17 of the Murphy and Smith text, you can read more about those in detail, also within the module, and gain better understanding of how those international treaties and declarations have supported reproductive and sexual rights. In this module, we'll also be looking at the public discourse on reproductive and sexual rights and how, over time, historically, those have been framed as negative rights. And negative, in the sense of human rights, doesn't just mean bad, but it means that governments are not required to enforce these rights. So even though we have international treaties and declarations, the fact that these have been framed as negative rights explains a lot in terms of why we have such high rates of HIV and AIDS transmission, why we have such high maternal mortality, and many other consequences for not providing reproductive resources and information and freedoms for individuals. So in the Murphy and Smith text in Chapter 8, there's an article called Going Negative, How Reproductive Rights Discourse Has Been Altered from a Positive to a Negative Rights Framework, that really does a great job in pinpointing several historical declarations that have actually worked against supporting reproductive and sexual freedoms. We'll also be looking at an issue that's often not framed within a human rights context, which is infertility. And in Chapter 23 of Murphy and Smith, there's an article by Himmerling called Infertility in Developing Countries, Scope, Psychosocial Burden, and the Need for Action. So combined with readings from the WHO, as well as this article, I think it sets up a really nice argument and conversation about the issue of infertility. Here on this slide, what you see is that infertility is not, even though it's usually framed as a woman's issue, it's actually equally shared between men and women in terms of being affected by infertility. So there is stigma, and there are myths, and there are social barriers relative to the issue of infertility that we'll dive into within this module. And some of the upcoming webinars, one in particular that is relative to what we're going to be talking about in Module 5, is the issue of human trafficking. Even though slavery was abolished over 150 years ago, there are more people living in slavery today than at any other time in history. So we'll have Mr. Robert Beiser, who is the Executive Director of Seattle Against Slavery, joining us to talk about prevalence and reasons why human trafficking exists and what we can do, even as individuals, to combat modern-day trafficking. So the activities this week are as follows. You will not have a discussion this week, but you will have a quiz to check your readings. Remember that you get 2 attempts and the highest score is counted. You can refer back to your readings, which primarily focus on Murphy and Smith, but anything that is required readings is game. Also, continue to work on your project. Make contact with your group members if you are in a group, or individually. Make sure you're sticking to your timeline. And if you need an appointment by phone or in person to talk about your project, please reach out. Also, keep in mind that you have a film critique and response paper due in week 6. So if you have some time within the week to watch a program or to watch one of the films that is listed as a suggestion in the additional resources area of the course, it'd be good to keep on track with that as well. So again, have a great week. I hope everyone is enjoying the class. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.